Today we are going to be talking about energy management and commissioning. So we're going to talk a little bit about upfront, initial, new build, retrofit commissioning. And we're also going to talk a little bit about recommissioning. And then we're going to talk about energy management, like how can you do it? What would be an EMIS? How would that work? If you don't want to spend a bunch of money on an EMIS, what are your other options? What we've done for some of our clients. And for context, Brad and I make up most of SES Consulting. Well, we're about 20 people. We're based in Vancouver. So sorry, a lot of these examples are going to be from Canada. But our company does mechanical design and a lot of commissioning because we came originally from a controls background. So we used to do like only recommissioning, and then now we do mechanical designs, like a lot of retrofits, heat recovery chillers, you know, low carbon technologies.
Lots of energy studies.
Still a lot of energy studies, and we're a bit of a different mechanical consulting firm in the market just because we came from a controls background. So when we commission, it's like a full commissioning as compared to, there's quite a bit of a range right now in what commissioning looks like. And so we're going to talk to you about what, you know, a functional test would be versus what performance commissioning is, because they're very, very different. Now, I know that there's probably a decent range of experience in the room, so please ask lots of questions. You know, we can pivot this session based on you. I wonder how many of you are contractors in the audience? Okay, engineers or consultants? Okay, what am I?
I feel like that's most owners, building owners,
product manufacturers,
building operators.
Oh, we have some building operators. Yes, they come less, but they're the best. Because I always talk about how important they are, so then they can just be here. Amazing. Anything to add on that?
No, yeah, just I'll echo that. This session is meant to cover, and we're going to start at the very basics and then sort of get into more complexity as we go. But again, this is very much geared to you guys. So lots of pauses for questions. Feel free to jump in, put up your hand. I'm hoping this can turn into as much a discussion as you just listening to us for the next hour.
I'll say we do a lot of teaching in this kind of space, and it's like one day I'll be teaching a heat pump 101 course, and someone's like, I'm a contractor, I've been installing heat pumps for 20 years. And I'm like, awesome, you wanna like co-teach this course with me? We'll have a discussion. So I'm sure there's a ton of experience. Feel free to add thoughts, problems, discussions. That is amazing.
Argue with us if you think we're wrong.
Totally, that's allowed. We won't kick you out. All right, can I move? Oh, I gotta go here. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about energy management. This slide was developed very quickly yesterday, so just bear with me. So when we're talking about energy management, typically we're talking about, you know, watching the energy use in your buildings, systems, right? So it sounds really basic, and it's like, well, of course I want to watch my energy use, but you would be surprised how rare it is for people to actually consistently monitor this and how many problems it creates. So we are going to talk about that. But just so we're all on the same page, when I talk energy management, I'm looking at my utility meters. That's super easy. Maybe I have sub-meters because I have a portfolio or a campus that they don't have utility meters, so maybe I'm using some sub-metering. Maybe I'm looking at my BAS. Maybe I'm looking at, you know, some of my thermostats or my BTU meters. I'm monitoring energy use of a specific system. It can be whatever we want to look at, but it's how much energy is the thing that I care about using, and it's looking at it more than once every 5 years. That's the trick there. Anything to add?
Yes. This may be a good point just to talk about metering for a second, because so I agree with Steph that this is important to know how much energy you're using. How you go about it is equally as important. And my advice is always to start basic. Use what you have. If all you have is utility meters, that's good enough to start. I've seen a lot of clients and worked with a number of them who think that they need to have 200 sub-meters installed across their campus before they can even think about doing energy management. And the problem is that's a very expensive project. It takes 3 years of their energy management budget. to pay for it, get it all commissioned. Metering is hard. It's hard to get meters working right, especially if you're installing your own sub-meters. So my advice there is, work with what you have rather than think that you need to go and get the best energy data before you can do anything. Because I think what that does, it slows down action. It means it's 3 years, 4 years before you can start generating savings. That's not to say that you can't go back later and install meters if you find out that you need them, and I think that's something you should do, but it's a process that kind of goes in circles and iterations, right? So start with what you've got, do what you can, see what improvements you can make, and then go back and do it better, right? Then go back with the sub-meters, get more granular data, continue to iterate that process.
Yes, let me tell you a little story, because I have a very good example of this. So remember, the goal of energy management is to, in fact, look at and then monitor the energy. So if you see, oh my gosh, this year we used twice as much gas, or oh, this month was really high, or this week or this day was really high, you're supposed to do something about it. That's the point of energy management. We don't want to just look at it and set it up and have a pretty graph. That's really not helpful. The goal is the very bottom one, taking action to improve and identify. So I have a client, university, 42 buildings, and they wanted to go through ISO 50001, which is a certification program to monitor, manage energy. It's like, it helps you kind of walk through all the steps. Are you familiar with that down here? Is that just a Canada thing?
That's international.
International, okay, I knew that. So.
The I in the ISO.
Right, I knew that, perfect. So ISO 50001. So we were setting that up, and as part of that, not a requirement, but as part of this client wanted to set up gas sub-meters and electricity sub-meters for all of their buildings. So 42 buildings, we're setting these up. And this has taken millions of dollars. It has been extremely challenging because they had a lot of these meters previously, and actually when I started working with them 7 years ago, they had all these meters in place, or at least 70-80% of them. But for the first 5 years that I worked with them, when we did energy studies, we had to guess at the energy history because it was known that those meters are all wrong. You can't use that data. So, 15 years ago, they had set up all these meters. The batteries had died. It stopped working. Nobody cared. Nobody checked. When we started to try and do an inventory of the existing metering, nobody knew where they were. So we're trying to find, it's like, oh, this building has 1 meter. No, it actually has 4. And we missed one, and we're trying to find it. And this meter is really old, and so it can't interact. And this meter's battery has been dead for 2 years. And it was a disaster. And so they did all this work, and they've set up these meters, and they're finally reading accurate because we happen to have a metering expert, much smarter than me, got all of it sorted. But I literally was on the phone with them this morning because they're like, oh, something's wrong with my BAS, my damper is open, my gas is on my air handling unit, why isn't it turning off? And the thing is it doesn't matter that they have these meters. They're actually not using them at all. Nobody's looking at it. Nobody's using it to determine, energy use. So when the operator asked me about this, I'm like, oh yeah, you've had this issue for a while. I just started doing an energy study on this building, so I hadn't been looking at it for the last 2 years, but actually this issue has been happening for 2 years. We're actively working to fix it. The issue is that there's not a lockout between these systems. So they have these nice fancy meters, and they checked that box for ISO 50001, and everybody felt really good that they invested in meters, but they're actually still not doing anything with it, and so it's really not helpful. So I guess the important part, like Brad said, is it's better to use what you have, even if that is trends on a BAS, a utility meter, maybe it's not even every building. Just use what you have and actually do something with it before you go and spend a lot of money setting up a better energy data set.
Yeah, if you're just starting your organization's journey in energy management, ISO 50001 is the last thing that you should be doing. That's advanced practice. You should be doing the very basics first. Start there. Do not start with something like ISO 50001 because you will spend years and not actually save any energy but you might get to kind of check a box off on a certification.
Well, and for the record, ISO 50001 didn't actually require submeters. You don't need to submeter all of your facilities.
It does. There's a lot to it, though. So I think
Yeah, but that was kind of a them thing.
yes. Should we move on?
Yeah. Okay, so energy management again. So this same client had all these meters and they're like, okay, I really want a nice platform and I want it to be pretty. I want it to be easy to access because I want sustainability and operations and like all of the people to be able to look at it and see these nice little graphs. And there are lots of softwares out there that do that. I'm sure many of you are aware of them. Some of you might even make them. There's lots of EMISs and they're very, very pretty. But what this client needed before they got the pretty platform was accurate data. Because when they were asking me about which EMIS provider should we use, let's set it up, what should the graphics look like? I'm like, okay, so all of your data is wrong right now. There's no point in setting up an EMIS. So what we actually did with them is we built them a simplified EMIS that pulled data from their building automation system, that's where the metering was reading, and put it into an Excel, just in the interim. So that they weren't spending, it was actually $60,000 to set up plus annual fees, so that they weren't spending that much on an EMIS up front. And now that they have accurate data, that we've got the deficiencies resolved, now that we've got an ongoing service contract with the BAS provider to make sure those meters stay accurate, now that we have confidence in the data, now they can move into a more, like a fancier EMIS. But I ask, it's funny because people ask me like, are your more advanced clients using EMISs? And then like maybe the more basic ones who are just starting out, are they maybe doing like Excel? And it's actually quite often that our most advanced clients have tried an EMIS and have decided, you know what, Excel is fine. Me just pulling my meter data into Excel and looking at it is fine. I don't need a fancy software. And so a lot of them have actually switched back. So I guess my message here is there's a lot of different ways to do energy management. It doesn't have to be expensive and fancy. All it means is you look at your energy once a month, not once every 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll say the clients I have who have retained software products, it's usually for some other reason. It's because it helps with compliance reporting, for example. Like a lot of those tools will automate if you have reporting under various like science-based targets or GRESB. There's a number of different certifications that your organization might be pursuing. And so I think that's where those tools can be a big labor savings and time savings to kind of auto-generate a lot of that reporting for you. But I agree with what Stephanie said, that you can do an awful lot with Excel. And I agree. Some of the clients who are doing full building decarbonization plans across the portfolio, it's all done in Excel. All the planning is Excel-based. And that's fine for them. So.
Do we have any questions about that? Please answer or ask questions as we go. Because we're going to move through a couple different topics, so you don't have to wait to the end. Just so you know. No pressure.
We like being interrupted.
We do like that.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so this is kind of the consensus. A tool is really only as good as what you want to use for it. So I'm totally picking on this client, and I will come up with other examples. I have lots. But again, the client was like, okay, I want all of these things. I want my weather normalized data. I want my predicted baselines. I want to be able to do this, and I want to be able to look at like the heating degree and the cooling degree, and I want to be able to see, what happened at this time. If I want flags, I want alarms, I want all of this. And I'm like, okay, but who's going to look at that? Like when there are alarms generated, when there are flags, who's going to look at it? And the issue with this client is nobody. Nobody's going to look at it. And so it's really only as good as what you do with the information. The clients I have that are using Excel, but like actually using it in the tools that we've built them, are doing way better. So, these tools, they can show you your trends. And there's lots of these. Like I've had one where we had this heat recovery chiller that recovered heat from this exhaust fan system, and it was installed. And then what happened was they had a building automation system. They switched providers. And so they did a big upgrade, and there were some issues with the commissioning of that upgrade. There wasn't a commissioning authority. We'll talk about that next, actually. That leads in quite well. And so what happened is nobody noticed that the heat recovery chiller wasn't properly set up as part of this switchover. And so for an entire year, they used about 3 times as much gas as they should have. So now they have this super fancy, very expensive piece of equipment, and they're still just running on their gas boilers, but nobody caught it for a year. And you know how I caught it? Doing an energy study, looking at the data in Excel. So it's super simple. It's really just about looking at it.
Well, their brand new fancy control system didn't catch it either.
Their brand new fancy control system did not catch it.
That's the other thing, I guess, here is beyond energy management tools. A lot of this applies to almost every piece of software in this sector. It's fault detection, maybe something people have heard of. It's the same story with fault detection software that you might overlay on top of a BAS. It generates takes a while to set up. Can anyway. It's getting better. The tools are helping the setup, and that's become a lot more automated lately. But we have an awful lot of clients who buy the license for a year or two and then they ditch it later. And the reason is because they have, it doesn't fix the problems for them, and they don't have the capacity to deal with the insights that it generates. So again, it's not the tool for them. They need to sit down, and they would probably be better served just scanning through, BAS graphics to find things, or just responding to cold complaints if that's all they have, right? If they're not going to make use of these software tools, which can be very expensive. And I guess my advice, we saw there was a lot of contractors here, a lot of consultants. If you're recommending these tools to your clients, just be very careful. The success or the failure of these tools is not a technical thing. I'm an engineer. We like to write specs. A good spec doesn't make a piece of software like this succeed. What makes software like this succeed is actually more of an organizational challenge on the owner side. Do they have an energy manager? Do they have people responsible for managing energy or carbon emissions? Is there anybody with the capacity who's going to look at this? Anybody who can act on making the fixes? Do they have a work order management system? Things like that. Those are all the questions I would be asking my client who was expressing interest in a piece of software like this. And I would recommend that they not do it unless I could check a lot of those boxes. Because, as I said, I think I certainly made that mistake early in our career, thinking, this software is the latest and greatest, and we're going to deploy it, and we're going to save all kinds of energy. And they were, expensive failures that the clients would have been much better served hiring a contractor to go through and just start checking valves. That would have been a better use of their money than software.
Yeah, and that applies to all software. I've rolled out a fault detection with a client who's like, I need this tool, it's going to fix my problems. But the operations team is like, well, I'm already so busy. I'm managing 42 buildings. All my equipment is failing. I'm dealing with comfort complaints. I'm not going to learn your new tool. I'm not going to look at your new tool. And so naturally it failed. So definitely the operator buy-in is really key. And if it's something that's going to add time and not remove time elsewhere, it's probably a no-go. That's typically what I've found. But this applies to I have a client, we're trying to roll out an AI with them. And because again, they got approached by an AI provider and it sounds really great. They're like, oh, well, they're going to pay their costs out of our energy savings. They're not going to charge me anything up front. I don't have enough operator capacity. I like new tools that are going to do my job for me. I think I'm going to consider it. And I'm like, okay. So I'm talking to the AI provider, and it all sounds lovely, but I'm like, so here's the deal. With this client, these operators are going to come in and override your fixes. Are you still going to be able to guarantee your savings? And they're like, well, no, that wouldn't work. So even an AI tool, any tool, you have to be ready for it and you have to set up the people and processes. And I think the biggest one that we've had the biggest challenge and or the biggest success is an operator that's bought in and has some capacity. And the trick is to set up control strategies for them that make their jobs easier so then they have the capacity to think about a new tool. Because if they're already strapped thin and they associate sustainability with more work, which has sort of become a thing within operations, they're not going to support you. I know we have a couple operators in the room. Anyone want to chime in? You don't have to, no pressure.
And I think along with that, it's, as energy engineers, I'm a mechanical engineer. I didn't expect to have to become an expert in organizational change management, but we've kind of had to become experts in organizational change management. Like the hardest part of energy management you will find as you get into this, it is never the technology. There's a technology solution for everything. Just go on the show floor and you'll probably find 100 different technical solutions to almost any problem you might have. The reason it's not going to work is going to be a people problem. It's going to be something inside your organization. That's a theme. I don't know how many of you have been here kind of since Monday through the different sessions we've done, but that was something we kind of picked up right away, is that, coping with complexity, trying to manage increasingly complex systems in our buildings and do the right thing, run them well. It's all people, it's relationships, it's trust. And I think that's what you see in energy management too. If you don't have the trust of the operators, for example, and you try to come in and deploy an AI tool on their building, it's not going to be very successful. If they're going to be able to just override it, it undermines the whole thing. So until you've done the change management work, you kind of got to do that, meet people where they're at. Maybe they're not ready for AI. Maybe they're just ready to walk through and check leaking valves. That's okay. That's where you want to start. And then you build that trust with them as they can see that you can help their facilities and save energy and you're actually not making their life harder. And then after 2 or 3 years, then you can say, hey, listen, I've got this great AI tool. I think it would really help you. And now they're ready to listen because you built that trust.
Yeah, and that sounds like hard and sad, but actually, if you're a contractor or you're equipment supplier and you can provide that like support, I have a relatively new client, they're a First Nations group, and they've asked me to do the most random things. They're like, I need to develop an emergency response plan for an earthquake. I'm like, I'm not a structural engineer. Like, I'm a mechanical engineer. Are you sure? They're like, I know, but we trust you. And what's happened to them is they've been burned so many times with like manufacturers and contractors and engineers that didn't really listen to them, like didn't actually understand their problems. And so now it doesn't matter that I'm not the cheapest and I don't really know what I'm doing. Like on some of the projects they ask me, most of them were fine, but some of them are just like out of left field. Like, I need an emergency generator. I'm not an electrical engineer. I can find you one and I can sort this out for you.
Sub-consultants are for.
And so we have a sub and it's fine, but like you would be amazed at how much building that relationship and that trust can support you. Like, I am so much more willing to have a tool that I'm like, oh, I kind of wish it didn't do this and like it's slightly less good here. If I have support from the manufacturers or from the contractor who is designing it, that I really trust. It's so much less about the equipment, and I find that from my clients all the time because we have, our business model is mostly just like delight your clients and they'll come back. So it's so much more about that building trust and I get a lot of clients be like, I've got approached by this. What are your thoughts? And a lot of times it's like, I don't think you're ready for that, But to make the sale, a lot of people are like, oh, trust me, this is going to be this. So if you can be that person that's like, let me really help solve your problems and meet you where you're at, I think that's going to help more than the latest tool for sure.
Yeah, that building that level of trust with our clients has been very good for our business. And, the contractors and the other vendors in the space, controls contractors, mechanical contractors, who we like to work with and who we invite to bid a lot of jobs are the ones that we know we can trust, who we know understand this process. And so that's kind of the foundation of all energy management is this trust piece, which I think is kind of, I like that, but it's a bit of an old-fashioned way of doing business sometimes. But I think in the long run, that has been more successful than trying to sell the latest and greatest tools to our clients, because they end up unhappy. We might make some money up front, but they end up unhappy and they don't come back as much.
We're going to pivot a little bit into commissioning. So are there any questions on this? Yeah. Do you want a mic or can you? Okay.
It is wildly varied depending on where, but 50%, I would say. If you've got nothing, I would feel that if you went from nothing to like full automation, starting to play with AI and have, personnel who are on it, 50% I think is doable in a lot of cases. I've seen more, I've seen less. I mean, sometimes people are starting from a better place and a brand new building that was actually commissioned properly. Yeah, you're not going to say 50%, but yeah, I think 50% is fair. I don't know. Steph, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, every time I go into a building to do a recommissioning study, 90% of the time we have scheduling opportunities. Like, that's so basic. I shouldn't be catching those, especially for these buildings that are like, I have all the ASHRAE 36 sequences. We're super high efficiency. Everything's great. And I'm like, oh, but this got overridden for that like event you had, and now it's been running 24/7. Or, oh, you couldn't meet your set point, and so you overrode your AHUs to 100%, but their dampers are actually 50% open, and it's minus some really cold temperature in Fahrenheit, because I can't think between Celsius and Fahrenheit. It's very cold outside.
Below freezing. We'll say below freezing.
So you should have had your dampers closed, and they think they're fixing the problem, but they're not. And that's where, like, you would see that when you're managing energy, and those things alone are going to save you about 50%. So
I would say most buildings that had not had their scheduling really looked at, they might even have a BAS, but nobody's looked at it. 10 to 30% savings just from scheduling. It's by far the best thing that you can do. It's our number one recommendation in every study that we do is scheduling, followed by ventilation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for the operators, this is two parts. How do you explain to them that this AI is not taking your job, the system is not taking away your job? And then two, what benefits are for the operator? Like, we get the building owner, saving money. What are the benefits to the operator?
I'm just going to repeat the question for people in the back in case you can't hear it. So it was kind of how do you make it so the contractor's not afraid they're going to lose their job via the operator's going to lose their job via all these upgrades. And then what was the second part was?
What are the benefits to the operator?
Yeah, what are the benefits to the operator?
Yeah, so I mean, I might not start with AI there, but what I have found is the operators that are engaged, they have been brought along with sustainability, and they have had measures. Like, I have operators that are like, oh, well, if you schedule my building or do the control strategies, everyone's going to be uncomfortable and they're going to complain to me. But what I've sat down with them and said is like, look, that's not my goal. My goal is never to save energy at the expense of comfort. Like, we should be going together and we should be saving both. And so what we'll do is we'll make tweaks, and then and I get them to weigh in. So I'll say something like, okay, this is what I was thinking. It could be a little bit aggressive, and I know that you have, concerned occupants in that space. Let's drop it down. And when I'm willing to be like, you know what, that's gonna save less energy, but I wanna meet you in the middle here. Like, let's save a little bit, let's make sure we're comfortable. So being, really, I engage the operators all the time. I'm talking to them all the time. They're sending me like screenshots, like, this is my issue. And I'm like, great, let me fix it with you. And I will prioritize it really quickly. And I think you have to sort of build that a little bit. So I probably wouldn't go to an operator that I don't have a good rapport with and be like, let's use AI. I would probably start with like, okay, what are your issues in your building? What's going on? Where you're seeing your comfort complaints? And then I would say, oh, with this other building, they're seeing comfort complaints. And so they're running things 24/7. They've ramped up all the air handling unit supply air pressure set points. So they've all been alarmed for like the last 3 months. And I'm like, so what is it that you were trying to do? And they're like, oh, well, my spaces are cold, so I'm running them 24/7 at 50% damper open and like very little heating. So you're not actually making it warmer, but I'm working through that with them, and I'll often get on calls with contractors or building operators and be like, here's what I'm thinking, and I'll let them weigh in. And even if it's gonna make it slightly less efficient, like I'm going to save slightly less energy, I will always take their concerns. You know, I'm running, for example, a boiler loop that has a non-condensing boiler, and my operator is like, you know what? I want a safety in there. I want to keep my water temperature at 60 degrees regardless. I know it's okay if I condense a little bit overnight, but that stresses me out. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, done. You know what? We're meeting in the middle. So I probably would have developed that with like some more simplified sequences, prove to them that it works, prove to them that they are supposed to get less comfort complaints, less operational issues as a result of your work. And then I would maybe introduce AI.
Yeah, I would always start with their pain points. Like that's when I'm with a contractor, an operator in the building or a contractor walking through, usually at the start of a study or something. And it's my first question is like, what bugs you about this building? What are the things that are frustrating you? And very often, I would say more often than not, there's a link to energy management. I think what's missing is the ability for the operator to make the case to their managers that this will save energy and how much energy, and to kind of provide that business case to spend the money. So that's where we come in. That's what we do, right? So we listen to what the operator says, get an understanding of the problem, and then figure out, oh, okay, we think this actually can save 10% of the energy or 15%, whatever the number is, and it'll cost this much to fix. Do a little business case for it, and then we give that to the owners, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, great, we'll allocate the funds, or we can get incentive funding to fix this problem." And so now you've helped the contractor solve something that's really been frustrating them. So in terms of your question, well, what do they benefit? Well, that's a direct benefit. You can get problems. Something often that's been bugging them for years that they couldn't effectively advocate for funding for, through an energy management process, by having someone, consultant or someone like that, to be able to come in and put that in business case terms. That's the missing piece to actually get the building rebalanced, for example. They've known for 15 years the building needs to be rebalanced, but it was always like, oh, well, it's going to cost 10 grand. No, we don't have money for that. But we come along and say, well, yeah, it's going to cost 10 grand, but you're going to save 5 grand a year and improve comfort. All of a sudden, that you get a very different answer, right?
Yeah, let me give you, I'm just going to give one example for that, and then we'll move on. Because so oftentimes when we get approached, it's not, I want to save energy. It's, I have this issue, my doors won't close, or they're really heavy to open, or I got this weird whistling in my building, or my spaces are so hot that my staff won't come in the summer months because it's just so hot in my building. And so if I say, hey, operator, AI, that's a hard pass. But for example, this client, it's this First Nations client, and it's one of those buildings that it was LEED platinum, it's wooden, all windows, it's stunning. It is the most beautiful building. And it has, since it's been built 5 years ago, been so uncomfortable that literally nobody will go in the summer months. And the operator gets so many comfort complaints. There's been so many issues. So over the last year and a half, we've worked with them to solve those. And it's been really basic things. It's been like, the way that the control valve isn't working, or, actually a lot of your control valves were broken, or they thought for the longest time that their chiller was undersized, but it turns out it was actually really undersized. It was cycling, so it was causing these long off times, and it was creating a lot of comfort issues. So over the last year, we've worked with them, we've solved these. They're like, my building has never been more comfortable. Now I talk to them about AI.
Question over there.
This could be for both taking energy measures in the building or recommissioning. Whose responsibility is it to go to the utility provider to try and secure a rebate or an incentive? You guys as the consultant trying to position that, or do you encourage contractors to make that part of their package?
So I think this is going to depend a little bit on the utility and the structure of the incentive programs. Some are, so where we work, and I think a lot of utilities follow this model, there's kind of different streams of incentives. So there's ones that are kind of, we call them prescriptive incentives. So it's like you do, add a speed drive, you get this much money. You change out a rooftop unit with one that's Energy Star rated, you get this much money. Those ones are really set up for the contractors to kind of manage themselves. That kind of prescriptive incentive that's very equipment focused, We don't tend to get involved in that sort of thing too much. We know about them and can advise clients, but those would be the ones I would advise that contractors get to know really well. There are other streams, usually the ones that involve conducting studies and then taking the results of that analysis, and that's what determines the incentive. The consultant, I think, gets a lot more involved there, and we do a lot of that on behalf of our clients. So they'll come to us, and even they don't even know the programs, and say, hey, we think we need a study. So in the background, I'm figuring out, okay, well, which study offer from the incentives is the right fit, or from the utility provider or the government or whatever is the right fit for what they're asking for. And then, I work with their account reps at the utility, fill out their applications, like kind of hold their hand through that process. I mean, that's a big value add of our firm, quite frankly. That's a lot of what and it helps us, right? Because then, we get the funding secured and then we get to do the work, doing the studies or whatever. So I think, so both are true. It's both the consultant, I think, and the contractor, but it would depend on the type of incentive. I think, the ones that are very prescriptive, very equipment focused, I think are the ones where because you often don't even need an engineer. You don't need an energy study. There's no reason to even involve someone like us a lot of the time, other than just adding billable hours. But I'm not that interested in getting involved in a project like that where we're not adding value. So, but something that's more complicated or does involve studies. I think it's and very often we get ourselves into no bid situations simply because I'm the one that's done the application for the utility. So by that point, we're kind of locked in, and I haven't had to compete against any other engineering firm for that work. So.
And I'll say that could be true of contractors as well. Like, I've definitely had contractors come to me and be like, hey, there's this incentive program for my product. Can we work together to, do a study and do this? And, that's probably work that wouldn't have come to them organically. And that's sort of how we do things, is sometimes I'll be like, oh, there's this new incentive program. This would be perfect for this client. I'm going to reach out, and, that would create work. It's not obviously quite as common, but definitely contractors who are like, oh, you're going to do a like-for-like rooftop unit replacement. Did you know there's actually like this $100,000 incentive for a dual fuel one? Often I'll say that, but if I wasn't involved, maybe they were just going to do a like-for-like and they mentioned that to their client. That could definitely lead to more work. And I've seen contractors do that, and it's definitely beneficial. When contractors do that, I'm like, oh, that contractor's on it. This is great. Yeah.
Follow up. So mostly we are doing the calcs. That's something that we do. For the program, and again, different programs have different requirements, but I'll say the ones most commonly that we work with, they usually is an engineering team at the utility that will review our work. And if they think we've said, well, you're going to run at, at 20 hertz 100% of the time, they're like, well, that seems a little aggressive. We don't believe you. And then we have to have a debate with them and kind of hash it out that way. But I've also had them push back, and then I've successfully defended. We say, no, this is why our assumptions are valid. And sometimes they'll accept that, and we get more money as a result. And so they, once you determine the savings, then most utility programs, the best ones will tell you straight up, you save this many kWh or this many therms of natural gas, you're going to get X dollars in rebate. But other ones have kind of like a secret formula where they take into account, okay, well, what's the measure life? Is the boiler, it's a VFD, how long is it going to last? And then, they use that to kind of crunch the numbers. So usually we get to that point, the numbers and the dollar values are not usually negotiable, I'll say. What's negotiable is kind of that savings estimate up front. This is great. Any other questions? We can dive into commissioning. Okay. So we're going to talk about commissioning, which I feel like everyone's like, oh my gosh, commissioning. But it is, well, we'll get to that. I'll tell you why it's really important and why it's a big deal. But before we do that, I just want to explain that there's two types of commissioning. So there is one that you will almost always see. And then there's one that doesn't always get included. And so we're going to talk about that. So when I say functional or basic commissioning, what that means is like,
I checked the valve, it opens. I check the gas section, it turns on. Does it work? Do the equipment components work?
You went through the manufacturer's checklist on the startup sheet, and you checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
Thing turns on, sensors record data, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that is often just like in the manufacturer sheet. I almost never have to ask for that. That's like, the contractors are going to do that without being asked. And then there's performance commissioning, which is not always included. But the difference is performance commissioning is, does it do what I said it was going to do? Does it save the energy I said it was going to do? If it's like a dual fuel system, is the heat pump running when it should? Is the gas coming on when it should? Are the strategies working in a way that things are responding the way they should? Is that damper open the right amount given what's going on in the system? Is it actually performing? And I'll say this is something that is often not included. We just got approached to be a commissioning authority on a new build, and I was like, okay, so we're supporting the mechanical engineer, so they probably already have a commissioning scope, they probably have a commissioning plan. No, there was nothing. There was no commissioning in there. So we're just commissioning it. Like, we're not overseeing the commissioning, we're kind of supporting with the commissioning. And I think that varies a lot. So building owners or anyone doing the projects, what I have found is that you often have to specifically spec performance commissioning in your RFQ or specifically ask for it, because this client who asked us to be a commissioning authority, she had no idea that there wasn't going to be any commissioning. And the reason she engaged us is because on her last project where they installed a big air to water heat pump in a hydronic loop in a school, they took an extra year because the piping was backwards and some of the valves were not opening and one side of the school didn't get cooling and the sequences weren't working. And so we were supposed to do work on it, and it was like, oh, actually it's not ready yet. And for an entire year, she was chasing down the contractor being like, this doesn't work. You're not allowed to leave. Come back to my site. And she's like, this isn't what I should be doing. So that's where we come in, doing that accountability, managing the commissioning. But that performance commissioning piece is often not common, and not to broadly generalize, but almost every time I go into a system, because this happens a lot, I would say 25-30% of our work at this point is, hey, we have this building, we installed this new VRF. Hey, we have this LEED Platinum building. We're using way more energy than we should, or this has never actually worked. We installed this solar thermal and we've never turned it on because it's never really worked. So it's a lot of that, and almost always that's a result of improper or complete lack of performance commissioning, not the functional check piece, because that really does get done most of the time.
Yeah, and I think what's important, and so we've also used some different terms. So this can be performance commissioning can be done on a new system, so you're installing a new piece of equipment. It can also be done as a recommissioning process on an existing building or on a part of an existing building that's one system. You don't have to recommission a whole building at a time. It can be nice to, because there's often a lot of interconnections between different systems. But let's say you've got a heat pump system like that's not working, you can go back and recommission that. But you can also, the best thing is to do it, at the time when the new equipment goes in. And this, performance commissioning, I feel like it's kind of a new concept that I have been starting to hear more about. I'm gonna give a little plug here. Again, this is more of a Canadian context, but we've just released 2 new versions of CSA, which is our Standards Association, a commissioning and recommissioning standard, so both commissioning and recommissioning, that have been updated to explicitly include a performance commissioning process. And the thing that's important with performance commissioning is that you are trying to achieve performance, and you have to know what performance you are trying to achieve. It is very difficult to do that kind of commissioning if you don't actually know what your outcome is. So that's where you need to look at, well, what were my energy models? We're commissioning the system to match that kind of performance. Or as a recommissioning process, we say, we're trying to reduce our savings by 10, 20%. We're trying to get that kind of savings on the energy bills. Or we're trying to solve a particular comfort issue. Or maybe we're trying to do all of the above, right? But there's got to be some objective, because you don't you're not done performance commissioning until you've hit your objective. So it's a process that's why it can take a long time, because you might have to go through multiple iterations to get there. And it might become an ongoing process. You might turn the performance commissioning phase into an ongoing commissioning phase. So there's lots of ways to do it, but the key there is, yes, you can start up the equipment, yes, you can turn it on, but is it actually operating as it was expected to? Is it achieving the performance targets we were expecting to see for our building? The only way to know that is to go through this performance commissioning process. And that's got to be a partnership between, it can't just be the consultant. It's got to be the consultant with the contractors, whether that be controls contractor, mechanical contractor, depending on the kind of system. It's got to be the building operators. It's got to be all of those people working together in that process.
Yeah.
So basic functional commissioning is testing components, not necessarily systems, because you can't experience shoulder seasons or other conditions, full loads, full occupancy, et cetera, right?
Yes.
So in the performance contracting, how do you cost effectively engage the contractors that are involved with the systems, right, to where it's manageable, right? I mean, obviously, you're asking them to wait another year, because they're getting signed off during the functional commissioning.
Yep.
Right? And they're getting paid during the functional commissioning. They go into their warranty period, typically 1 year, right?
Yep.
So how do you keep them engaged and enthusiastic to get the best functioning system out of it when you're done?
I think the key thing is that there shouldn't be, there's always some surprises, but you try to keep the surprises to a minimum. So make sure that the commissioning is in the spec. The contractor shouldn't hear about the commissioning only after the fact. And we see that happen a lot with the job's 3/4 done, and all of a sudden the owner decides that, we want some enhanced commissioning at this phase. Well, yeah, now we have to go through a whole change order process, and sometimes they think it should be done for free. It gets messy, right? So I think having, commissioning, this is the other, I think, key point with commissioning, is commissioning doesn't start when the equipment's installed. Commissioning starts during the design phase. You should have your commissioning team, whoever that's going to be. It can be third party, doesn't have to be third party. We do lots of projects that are not third party commissioned, and it's fine. But whoever is going to be the commissioning team should be there at the project from the very start. So you should, the commissioning plan ideally is part of the spec that goes out. So when the contractor's bidding the job, they see, this is the commissioning plan I'm expected to follow, and it's 2 pages or it's 20 pages, but at least they know, and they can scope it appropriately, and then they can,
You sign off on a functional performance test, everybody agrees, it met the intent.
yeah.
Problem is commissioning in itself without implementation is worthless. Right? Because if you don't affect change, all you have is knowledge, and if you're not applying that knowledge, then what the use of that is?
Yeah, and so our process is when once the functional check's done, then we go into this performance process, and we've got engineers combing through all the trend logs and the sequences to find stuff that's on when it shouldn't be, or temperatures that are the set points are not doing what they're supposed to, or the PID loops aren't tuned, and create a list, right? We create a big list of all the sort of the performance deficiencies, and we go back and forth with the contractor. Again, this takes some trust though, because you can how do you know when you're done, right? Is it when there's absolutely nothing left to find? Is it when it's working well enough? There's a judgment call there, right? And often it's on us to say, this maybe could be a little bit better, but we're happy enough that we're going to call it here.
So in planning stage, would it be beneficial for owners then to build in a 1-year service agreement afterwards to make sure that they get the best functioning system that they can?
That's one way that we've done it. Yeah, we've definitely asked. Yeah, to have that. I'd actually just put a DDC spec out last week, and that was something we had included, was a line item in the pricing table for what we want 1 year of ongoing service to support this stuff. There are other ways too. We have other clients who it's kind of dealt with almost during the warranty phase. They've already been paid out, and that works better where there's trust, right? If it's the incumbent contractor who's been in the building for 20 years, I feel pretty comfortable that they're going to be there to help solve these problems for us. And it's also about being reasonable, right? Like if we're asking them to do something that is outside of the original design intent and it requires additional sensors, like, we got to talk about change orders at that point, right? So, other questions? Yeah.
I had a question, just along the lines. Who do you think should be writing performance tests? Work control contractors, so should be a collaborative effort. Engineers should be involved, commissioning agents. Ultimately, who should that fall to?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it should fall to whoever's in charge of the commissioning process. And I've seen that be consultants. I have also seen it be contractors. I think it's got to be clear who is the one overseeing that. I think in most of the projects we work on, we ultimately write the commissioning plan, but we will defer to the contractors sometimes about specific tests on equipment. So I think it's got to be that collaboration, right? Like I certainly wouldn't be able to write that for every piece of equipment, but I do want to describe in broad strokes the intent. Like I want to make sure the intent is communicated clearly, and then if there's details like that we need contractors or the tab folks to fill in for us, then great. We'll rely on them to do that.
Yeah, and it's definitely like we'll do it collaboratively. I'll write it and then I'll get the contractors to weigh in on it, and they're like, oh, this, I don't like this. I don't think we need to do this. Then I'll change it, so it's definitely collaborative. It is usually the engineer who manages it. And I'll say, it's been alluded to in the conversation that obviously a year of performance commissioning is sometimes a hard sell after you've spent $10 million on a project and you're like, I just want to be done. Substantial completion is done. Like, I don't want to commission. Interesting sound. Okay. But what we've found, though, is that the clients who didn't do performance commissioning, who didn't work with us and decided to go with a contractor or consultant team that didn't really do the performance commissioning, they're now coming back to us and saying, my equipment, it's never worked. It's been 4 years, it's never worked. My operator has to manually turn everything off because the VRF and the gas backup hydronic system can't interact together. It's never worked. And so we're starting to see more of an appetite. I'll say that. So a good example, we just installed this big heat recovery chiller at a mall. And so the mall has a big cooling load year round. We're recovering heat from the mall and we're putting it into the domestic hot water of these 2 multi-unit residential buildings that sit right beside it. So big project. Originally, the goal was to have 2 phases. So phase 1 was install this big heat recovery chiller, and phase 2 was actually a sewage heat recovery system. Now, of the 2, the heat recovery chiller was a much better business case, but the sewage heat recovery was more of a we got an award for it, look at how cool this is. So what we ended up doing is we did phase 1, we did this heat recovery chiller. It was about a $750,000 project.
Put the numbers up here.
I put them up, look at me go.
This should be 750,000 though, not 175.
Oh, I switched them around, dyslexic. 715, not 175. So, it was about that much. And we did advanced performance commissioning. So we spent $20,000 on that performance commissioning. It's,
I'll say we did it eventually. Initially, the system was starting up and we were getting the savings that we expected. So we were getting kind of, 6,000 to 8,000 GJs of savings. But then we have a wonderful contractor, actually, used to be contractor, controls contractor, now on our engineering team. Contractors, man, they know everything, let me tell you, if you ever want a job as an engineer. And so he was doing all this advanced performance commissioning, and he did this for, $20,000 worth of cost. And we actually ended up saving double what we said we were going to do because of this advanced performance commissioning. We saved so much that they're not doing phase 2. So that saved them $2 million because they're actually saving as much as they thought they would save in phase 1 and 2. They're saving it in just phase 1. And so this client is ecstatic, obviously, and the system is working. There's been no comfort complaints. And I feel like that's one of those things when performance commissioning goes right, it really illustrates to them how much value it has.
And it does take a while. Sometimes it takes them not doing it, not seeing performance, and then having to come back later to learn that this is really critical. But it is like something that we really try and make a case for because it always pays off.
Yeah, and this is where it's kind of an iterative process too, because in this case, it would have been very easy to just start it up and leave it. Like we were saving what we thought we would save. But it was only because we sort of always go through and review the systems in detail. And as I said, we've got a controls tech on staff to help us through our commissioning process and recognizing that, wait a minute, there's a lot more opportunity here than we thought. And you can see where those opportunities are and how the equipment's working, and then convincing that, yes, we should go forward and let's try to squeeze a lot more out of this, and more than double the savings as a result of the project. And so but that's the other thing, and I think that also worked because working very closely with the controls contractor. I think the other point I wanted to make here was, I said, commissioning doesn't just happen at the end. So one of the things we like to do, is let's say we've written the control spec, we've written a sequence of operations. Before anyone writes a line of code or starts doing any kind of block programming, we'd love to sit down with the programmer and just go through the sequence and just kind of check it with them to be like, is this going to work? And very often they'll pick up things and say, well, if you do that way, you're going to end up with these two systems fighting, or you're going to have hunting set points. What about if we change? And looked at a different sequence of operation, and the key being, as long as it still achieves the intent. At the end of the day, the only thing I care about is the intent of the design. Now, are we meeting the intent? I don't really care how we get there. If a trim and respond algorithm is better than using a PID loop for this control point, I don't actually care which one it is, as long as we pick the one that works the best. And that's where I want the contractors, especially the good ones, to come to us and say, listen, we've got better ways of doing this. And we take their advice and we update things. And then if we have that conversation before they start programming, then we're not having to go back and fix all those things during commission, because guaranteed, although those things are going to end up being problems we find, then we have to say, okay, well, we got to change it. And at that point now, we're already past the, we're into the warranty period, and it's way better to solve those problems up front.
And just for the contractors in that room, that advanced performance commissioning where we saved all that, contractors all got change orders. Everything was like, everybody was happy, client was happy, and that net cost just way outweighed the second phase. So any other questions?
We have 3 minutes left, so if you have questions.
We will pause for questions.
Yeah, and there's retro commissioning, there's recommissioning, there's continuous commissioning, there's all kinds of different terms that refer to sort of different things. I mean, the really quick answer is like the rule of thumb we go by is kind of every 5 years at a minimum for retro commissioning. But it's like, in any recommissioning or retro commissioning, and the exact definition of the two, recommissioning is meant to be going back and redoing something that has already been commissioned. Retro commissioning is usually referring to going back to systems that were never commissioned. But there's a lot of overlap in those terms. But they are inherently a performance commissioning process. Like that, almost in its purest form, because that's what you're going back and doing, is finding performance faults, looking for leaking valves, looking for bad sensors, looking for sequences of operation that aren't working very well, looking for condensing boilers that are not condensing because the hot water temperatures are too high. You're looking for chillers at short cycle, stuff like that, right? And so those are all performance aspects that you want to find. I would say continuous or ongoing commissioning is like that's the next level up in terms of difficulty, because at that point you really need to have the engaged operators who have the bandwidth to do that. And we've coached a lot of them through it. We can provide you an ongoing commissioning plan that lets you know what to look for, but just starting with fixing issues, I think would be what I would do. Question here? So the question is there any interference between performance commissioning and energy auditing? Or overlap, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an energy audit really is a study to performance commissioning. So it's like, what are the problems? And then the fixes are really the performance commissioning. So like we said, we see that what's typical is every 5 years. And so you would do an energy audit, you would identify the issues, and then the fixing of those issues would be considered performance commissioning.
Yeah, almost every audit we do, so we're looking at changing out lights or new boilers, new rooftop units, whatever. But usually the number one recommendation before all of that is you need to do some recommissioning. So it's often the gateway into that, and then that flags it for the client, and then maybe from there we can go and see, are there some recommissioning incentives out there? A lot of places have those, and then we can leverage those programs and then actually go into the recommissioning process. But usually is identified first as part of an energy audit or an energy study.
Yeah, because unless you had, and this does happen too, I've had clients where they're like, look, I don't have budget for performance commissioning and I know I need to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an energy audit as soon as the equipment is installed and operational, because there's incentives for an energy audit, and I'm going to use that to performance commission this. So we have seen that as well.
We are at time. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone coming out today. If you don't have plans, come back here in about half an hour. We're going to be talking about AI and kind of a very, 1 hour, my mistake. Practical uses of AI, and then we have another session with Scott Cochran and Stephanie again talking about introduction to BAS. Thank you, everyone.